Welcome everyone to Author's Corner. I'm your host, Toyin Umesiri. This show is brought to you by Caris Publishing. This is a platform where we highlight the work of incredible authors from around the world who carry an important message that they've taken time out to put in a book and to keep sharing with the world. I'd like to welcome you, Mr. David, to the show today. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm actually excited to dive into your world of mentorship. And this is something I incredibly believe in. So I'm excited to learn more about you, your work, your passion, your impact as well. And I know our viewers will also be delighted to learn more about you. So please go ahead and introduce yourself
Sure.
and the title of your book and the story behind your book.
Right. So I'm David Riffel. I wear many different hats. So one is I am a partner in an architectural firm in Wichita, and I've been with this firm for frankly my whole career. I was their first employee, and now I'm one of the old guys. I'm one of the senior partners. But also with that too, I'm executive director of a nonprofit called Mentoring Warriors, and that's frankly the name of my book that I also wrote. And so I wear several different hats, and it's been exciting, really exciting time.
Wow. So, what brought you to actually writing this book? And what's the message that you have for men? I believe it's directed towards men.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So I'll back up my story a little bit. So about almost 7.5, 8 years ago, right, a few weeks after my daughter's wedding, I went into the cardiologist because I had been having a little bit of kind of squeezing in the chest.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, I think we're going to just have a heart cath and we'll probably put a few stents in and you'll be off work for a few days and be back, ready to go. Well, we go in there and he wakes me up on the heart cath table and wakes me up and points to the screen and says, well, we found it. You have a widowmaker is 95%, your right coronary artery is 95% blocked. So next
Whoa.
thing I know, I'm having quadruple heart bypass surgery.
Wow.
And what I like to say is when you're a guy in your 50s,
Mm,
whether you love Jesus or not, when you have
mm,
heart surgery, it rocks your world.
mm,
And it
mm,
really started this whole question of that was January of 2016. And it says it was really rocking my world in terms of like, why am I here?
mm,
What is my purpose?
mm.
And I'll just be honest, 2016 was a struggle of a year,
Wow.
just trying to figure out. So the Lord started putting things two and two together for me,
Mm,
realizing I have such a passion. I've always had a passion for those younger guys, kind of upper teens into their 20s and 30s, those young adult
mhm,
years of just launching, and how my time when I was that age, I was mentorless.
mm, mm,
And it wasn't that I didn't have successes in life. I went to
mm,
university, I graduated with a degree in
mm,
architecture. I got my
mm.
first job. I went to Europe. I did things. And eventually, by the time I was 29, I got married.
Wow.
But it's like, had I had a mentor, I would think that some of the things that I went through and struggled with may have been handled in a more mature way
Mm.
if I would have had somebody come alongside me.
Oh,
So what I did was through that passion of that ache and that passion I think the Lord put in me for mentoring, what I did was I teamed with Wichita State University Department of Psychology.
wow.
And so I went to them and I asked the question, qualitatively speaking, what does it take to have a healthy mentoring relationship with guys kind of in what I call the warrior stage of life, kind of
Mhm,
18 to 30, young adult. So what they did was they assigned me to a graduate student who did some qualitative research. And then what we did was we asked a series of men that
mhm.
enter young guys. And then we also interviewed and surveyed young guys in that age who have mentors.
Okay.
What are the rubs? What are the successes? And so we took a lot of that information, we put it into the book, and then, along with that, what I developed was a 30 some question self assessment.
Okay.
And it's kind of like what I tell people, it's like going to take your blood pressure. It's just getting a pulse on where you're at. It's not right
Mm.
or wrong answers. And we developed 6 categories of life that young guys are facing.
Wow.
And so when you go through that survey, and it's online on our website,
Mm.
you can take it. It gives you kind of an idea of, hey, we need some focused mentoring in this particular area.
Wow.
And it helps then when we start maybe networking and maybe helping a young man find a mentor,
Yes.
in a certain area of life. So, anyway, Wichita State did that. I wrote my book, teamed with Karis Publishing, and it's been very good. And what
Wow.
we've also done is started a nonprofit by the same name, Mentoring
Mm.
Warriors. And one of our highlights that we do is we do an 8-week boot camp.
Wow.
And that 8-week boot camp goes over the book. And we've developed kind of a little workbook field manual.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that it helps equip men
Yes.
how to go about mentoring.
Wow.
So,
Quite incredible. You talked about, your moment of, I will call it being awakened.
mm-hmm,
Um, because I always say that, we could live multiple lives because we are all in one way or the other programmed by systems, by culture, by nurturing. Is that by the time we arrive in the world, people that came here before us tend to guide us through their own knowledge, their own capacity, and then we emerge as a reflection of
right,
that programming, nurturing, right? Nature, community, the culture that raised us produces us in a way. And I feel like there is a time for God to also awaken us to his own purpose.
mm-hmm,
And I think it does it in different ways.
right,
Sometimes it does it in gentle ways, but I've also seen where it's situations where you actually have to face yourself. It's
mm-hmm,
not just that you're facing the end of life, you actually have to face yourself. And then you have to ask yourself certain questions to say, okay, is this it? Is this the life? Is this the best of me?
right,
And what I found is that waking up of the true self is quite incredible because I think there's a lot more power, passion packed in that being awakened is that you become unstoppable.
right,
You become unstoppable, and there's clarity, there's focus, there's passion involved, and I think there's also mission. So this is quite incredible for you to direct that passion, that energy towards mentoring young men. What
mm-hmm,
I've also heard from you is that there's almost two sides to it. There's the young men
mm-hmm,
that desire mentorship
right,
or that acknowledge a need for it because this is
right,
something you cannot impose. They get to leverage the self-assessment to evaluate their own current state.
right,
Okay. And then what I'm also hearing is you have tools that you use to equip and mobilize mentors that
mm-hmm,
want to partner with those young men.
right.
Did I get that right?
That's right.
Fantastic. So two groups of people can come to your world, right? Those who need mentorship and those who desire to also mentor.
And the truth of the matter is, so far, like we're a young organization, but we've trained and equipped 90 men
Mm,
so far, and mostly in the Wichita metro area. Although I've had some guys from Canada zoom in and be able to do it also, which has been great. But sometimes what I've learned is a lot of times when those first sessions happen on the 8-week boot camp, we'll meet like once a week for 8 weeks. Um, you get the deer in the headlights look.
mm.
Like, I know I need to do this, but I'm scared to death. And usually what I'll hear is, yeah, but I haven't been the best in my career. I haven't done, I'm not very good at this, or my marriage could be better. And I'm like, and we're not looking for perfection.
Mm,
What we're looking for is a man who is teachable,
mhm,
a man who is willing to take the mistakes and struggles that we've been through
mhm.
and kind of come alongside a younger man, put your arm around him and say, you know what, been there, done that, bought the t shirt. Let me
Yes.
walk with you for a season of life. and let's work through some of the issues that you're going through as a young man that had I would have had a mentor, I
Mm.
would have loved to have had.
Oh my gosh. As I'm listening to you, there are two people that I think I need to connect you with after this interview. Two incredible men that are literally changing the world and impacting the world. One is Brian Molitor. I don't know if you've ever heard about him, out of Michigan. And the other is Dale Dawson. They both have incredible stories
Mm,
of mentorship. In fact, Brian, I believe, did a series, a TV show on mentorship. He has actually has programs on rites of passage for
mm,
young men,
yeah,
and he's an executive trainer. He's incredible.
yeah.
And Dale Dawson, literally, his work impacts nations, and he facilitates the training of young men out of Africa, and he partners with Ivy League universities
Oh
around the
wow,
world, and he places them tuition free with
yeah.
this program, and then they get to go back to Africa to impact their nations and politics in the world of business. So those two people immediately come to my mind just listening to you. So definitely, if you're open to it, I'll
Well,
let.
that would be, that'd be great because one of the opportunities we have coming up with Mentoring Warriors in 2024 is to go to Malawi
Oh wow!
for 2 to 3 weeks to do some intentional mentorship training of young men over there.
Oh
So
wow!
we're working with a mission organization over there that's getting kind of the thumbs up on it, and we're starting to make the
Okay.
plan. So yeah, one of the questions
Okay.
that one of the questions that's been posed to us by the young men in Malawi is when I don't have a job and when I
Mm,
don't have the money, what do I do?
yes.
And
Yes.
so those ideas of how can we help develop some kind of a
Yes.
skills or entrepreneurial thinking might
Yes.
help, or are there some possibilities of linking these young men who might develop an industry or a cottage industry in Africa with some
Oh,
people in the States? So we're kind of working through all
oh
that.
my gosh, you're speaking
But,
my language. In fact, this is the work that I do, right? In fact, there's another person that has already solved what you're trying to solve.
right.
Is the former CEO of Tyson Foods,
Hmm.
and he leverages agriculture as sustainable agriculture,
Right.
chicken, protein, all of those things to
Right.
equip people from a commercial standpoint.
Right.
So not just charity typically as it's seen,
Right.
but equipping people with the skills for
Right.
sustainable, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So this is definitely, I'll definitely probably send this video to
Yeah.
to them and then make some introductions.
That'd be great.
Yes, yes, yes. So yes, I really love, the world that we've entered in, because there's so much work. There's so much work. The Bible talks about the harvest is plenty, the laborers
Oh
are
yeah.
few.
So
So
I like to take that verse out of Luke, that one you just mentioned. And I
yes.
always like to say, Jesus says, the harvest is plentiful, the mentors are few. But
Oh.
to pray for the Lord to raise up more mentors. So
Mm,
we've done some surveys, and the general trend tends to be like Wichita metropolitan area is about 650,000,
wow.
and those young men demographically from 18 to 30, whether they're single or married, they represent about ballpark 7.5% of the population. So
Wow.
there's somewhere in Wichita around 50,000 of those men. And from what
Mm,
we've been able to determine in Wichita, and this seems to hold true for other urban areas, is only 2 to 4% really have a mentor.
mm,
So in Wichita, we're talking maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 guys. And I know that sounds like a lot of guys, but think about the ones that are not being mentored.
wow.
And what we have found is the hunger for some of those young guys, they are just longing to have somebody speak
Yes.
into their life. And that reminds me of 2 Timothy 2:2.
Mm,
And that's one of our verses. We have the guys on the boot camps have to memorize. In 2 Timothy 2:2, Paul has just been pouring his life into Timothy, young Tim. And he says, Paul knows he's coming kind of to the end of his ministry. And he's
mm,
like, Timothy, Tim, the things that you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to
mm,
faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So
Mm.
it's the idea of Paul to Timothy to faithful men to others.
Yes.
And what I like to say is if I take the time to invest in one man and he in turn catches that vision and invests in
Yeah.
another man, then as I like to say at my age, long after I'm dead, gone, and forgotten, there
Wow.
will be men in this world changing culture
Wow.
because of Christ, because of their faithfulness of one guy. I
Wow.
can tell stories about that of people that from a guy Samuel Chadwick who was born in 1860s
Mm.
back in the UK, who influenced a man Leonard Ravenhill, who came to America and then had influence on other people and then on me. And so Samuel Chadwick never knew who I was. He was
Wow.
born 100 years before me, but yet that 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 legacy of the gospel
Mm-hmm.
continues and affects the culture. And so,
Wow.
yeah, let's just say once men find out there's opportunities to mentor these young guys, they're coming out of the woodwork. We want mentors. We want mentors. And now the issue is how
Absolutely.
do we develop them? And it's not like insert this formula and
Mm-hmm.
mentor. It doesn't work that way. It's a relationship building, and we talk
Oh,
about that in my book, how to build
yes.
relationships.
Yes.
So
I love this because as you're speaking, different names are just dropping into my mind because there are like you're not alone in this mission. I
right,
think that's the main message I just want to share with you
okay,
because as I'm listening to you, I've had the opportunity to just encounter incredible men around the world that are equally as passionate, equally dedicated. They've built platforms, structures. And another one that just came to my mind, David Roth out of Arkansas. He
mm,
actually built Work Matters.
mm,
Work Matters really it's mentorship in the world of business, and really faith-based business mentorship.
mm,
So bringing your faith into work and
yeah,
not just separating. So there are incredible people doing incredible things, and I would love to definitely
yeah, they would
connect
definitely,
some of them. And
yeah,
and one of the things that is also fascinating to me is one, your inclusion of the world of academia, right? So my
mhm,
husband is a professor. I
right,
was raised by university administrators, so I grew up in the university system. That's why I also built like a business school online, and so I believe heavily in education, right? So part of mentorship could be inspirational, motivational, but there's also this component of equipping through education.
right,
And so I appreciate that. The second thing listening to you is the structure behind it, right? You talked about your book, the steps, the structure. Is that oftentimes when people want to mentor, when there's no structure, it's kind of just fizzles
right,
out, right? It just doesn't hold water.
right.
You're not able to measure the impact. You're not able to assess the interest level. So what you have here definitely, I believe, has incredible potential to just keep growing and keep
Oh
expanding
yeah.
the capacity. Definitely. So tell us a little bit more about the book. Where can people find it? And also beyond just the book, you talked about your website. Do you have
Mm,
social media programs,
right.
podcasts, any other thing people can
Sure. Well,
access?
the book's available obviously on Amazon and on our website, which is mentoring-warriors.com.
Mm.
As I always remember to remind people, put the dash in there, mentoring-warriors, because if you don't, you're going to end up with a wrestling website in Anderson, Indiana. It's not us. But yes, you can pretty much get it any kind of place. I know you can get it on Amazon.India also, because I've sent
Yeah.
a book to somebody in India.
Wow.
But basically, the what we do in the book, as I mentioned, I kind of weave in my story, but I also weave in principles that we need to have in terms of building relationships in a mentoring context.
Mm.
And so I look at it less as a program and more of as an organic way
Okay.
to do life together. I was just, for an example, this morning meeting with a young man, Alex. He's 25, and we were just talking about that idea that when Jesus had his disciples, they did life together. It wasn't like,
Mm.
okay, Peter, okay, John, let's meet for 2 hours today at a coffee shop, and then I'll see you next week.
Mm.
And sometimes mentoring needs to be more than just once a week kind of thing. It's
Okay.
we do life together.
Life.
And so, well, I'll get into a little more about some of that, but there are a couple of areas that I want to talk about in the book. So
Yes.
beyond my story, one of the things I want to talk about is this idea that there's four levels of relationship building,
Mm.
and the first one, it's called superficial. If I
Mm.
had to write the book today, I'd probably call it more discovery.
Wow.
And in relationships, it's like, okay, you get together and like, oh, you like the same sports team. You find the commonalities of what you like. Oh, and I joke around, hey, I'm a Pepsi guy. Oh, you're a Coke guy, or whatever it is. You like fishing or camping or whatever the events are. And then what happens is most relationships start there. And
Yeah.
what you're doing in that stage of life, and you think, well, we're just talking about small stuff. Small,
Mm.
but what you're actually doing is you're developing what we call phatic connections with people.
Mm.
And so PHATIC, phatic. And what happens is those little, it's like you think of a little plant and those tiny little roots that are starting to grow down into the soil, and they're intertwining with other ones.
Mm.
And the reason why those are so important to build that time of what I'll call superficial is because you can't really go deep in a relationship until you start to build some of those.
Mm.
So once you start getting a level of that, and the young man goes, hey, David is a safe guy. I can trust him. I can tell him some things. Then what happens is we kind of break what I call the glass floor or the glass ceiling, and then we start getting authentic. Hey, I've just had some really times lately where I've just getting frustrated at work. Maybe we could talk
Mm.
about that sometime. Or, I'm trying to move out of the house, and my parents just, I just know, no, we're kind of rubbing each other the wrong way. I'd like to talk with you about it sometime.
Mm.
So authentic becomes the next. And one of the things in mentoring is you model that in reciprocity. In other words, yeah, I understand. I kind of been there too. I get you. Let's get together. Then
Wow.
the one after that, after authentic, so you got superficial, authentic, and the next one is transparency.
Mm.
It's kind of like, you and I can't drive a car in a rainstorm without wipers. The wipers
Mm-hmm.
in it. I need something so I can have a better picture of what's going on. And ultimately, the behaviors that guys struggle with are actually rooted in my heart. It's rooted in what's going on in their heart.
Wow.
So, transparency. And then the last one is vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to say is most men are very afraid of becoming vulnerable
Yes.
because it shows their weaknesses. When in reality, like we like to talk about in Mentoring Warriors, is, but you know what? Vulnerability is the most courageous thing that a man can do,
Mm.
because when you show this is the raw me. I am undone. I need help. I am broken. I have wounds. What do I do with these? Then that's the part where, frankly, the Holy Spirit can come in, and with the help of a mentor walking along with you through story of your life that you're going through, can start to see some healing.
Wow.
So those are the four areas we like to talk about. And so remember, the superficial, you're phatic. But as you build that, then when you get deeper into that relationship, now I can be emphatic with the guy.
Mm.
I can proverbially grab him by the collar and say, listen, love you, man, but this has got to change in your life, and let's
Yeah.
walk through it together to figure out how.
Yes. Wow. I think most people want to get to that deep level and skip the steps.
Right,
And I think that's where it backfires a lot, where you have boundaries and pushbacks,
right,
is that until we've earned the access and
right,
until we've created, what I call emotional safety,
right,
um, I don't think we ever will experience the depth of what's possible in the relationship,
right,
right? And so what I've also seen in society is that generally speaking, it's not safe, right?
right,
Why people want to be vulnerable, but also we can only do it in safe spaces,
correct,
right? In
right,
safe environment with people who have cultivated safe spaces for us. And when we look at society today, when we look at what's going out in the world today, it's actually not safe. It's less safe today because there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of control, there's a lot of things out there that is not safe for ultimately our well-being, right? So I hope and pray, right? Even for me, when we talk about the church ought to be natural places where we can find safety, we can find meaning, we can find mentorship, we can find support, we can find encouragement, we can find inspiration. That's by design how God intended it, to create a community of believers, people who believe in Jesus Christ, right? Doing life together, to your
Right.
point, and supporting one another in deep, deep, deep ways.
Right.
So this also is what's the state of the church, because there's incredible need for this. There's always going to be need for this,
Right.
whether in the family unit or in the society and beyond, is that there's always need for humans to feel seen, heard, nurtured,
Mhm.
cared for, nourished, and you know, right, the original plan would be for the whole world to be like this, right, for society in general to be designed
Right.
around this principle. But I think we've missed it as a people in general. We've missed it. So now we have to recreate these safe spaces. Would you agree with me on
Oh, I
that?
would agree absolutely. And what we like to do at Mentoring Warriors is we also know, I love a phrase that John Eldridge has used. It's
Mm.
adventure feeds the masculine soul. So one
Mm.
of the things that we do is we try to, throughout the year, create some events that are outdoor adventure related,
Okay.
just to bring guys together, just to do kind of, hey, we're living, we're camping, or whatever it's going to be. So one of them we do is every summer we've been doing out in Colorado a
Mm.
mountain man adventure, and
Wow.
we'll take anywhere from a dozen to maybe 20 guys out, and we actually stay at a church, and then we do fire pit times every night talking about different
Wow.
aspects of manhood. But then during the day we'll do some outdoor adventures like well, we went jeeping this year, or we do whitewater rafting, or
Wow.
a bunch of guys. I'm too old for this now, but a bunch of guys will hike a 14er, a
Wow.
14,000-foot mountain, and just have a great time of bonding. And it is so amazing to watch guys who maybe come together who really didn't kind of knew each other, maybe, and they're just like on it. And
Oh, trust me, I'm smiling because for us women who totally jump and go for a retreat.
yeah,
While you guys go outreach, we want to retreat
yeah,
and do. That's
yeah,
why I'm laughing. Like, oh wow, interesting. We both want the same thing, but what tickles us or what makes us get that safety scene? It's not, for many people. It's not outdoors. For some, it is. But
yeah,
I think that quietness, spa day, whatever that is,
yeah,
definitely for us women, right? We will go on a retreat
right,
like that.
yeah, yeah. But
Wow.
you spoke about being, I think what God's done in each one of us, men and women, is we
Mm,
desire to be known and to be loved. We
absolutely.
want relationship, and ultimately, that's a vertical relationship with Christ. That's where we need to be. But then, as we build that relationship, now through mentoring, we can
Hmm.
develop these horizontal relationships that are what I call intergenerational. You know, I
Yes.
mentor guys that I'm old enough to be their dad. Probably in some cases, I could be their grandpa. Who knows? But and it's just very I don't know. It's just it helps me to understand. I struggled in some of those same areas they are.
Hmm.
Some of those things. What does it say in First Corinthians, that no temptation has overtaken you, but says common to man.
Yes.
You know, um, but God always provides a way out, and it's so encouraging to be able to walk with these guys and to see them find victories over struggles in their life. And I'm just going to be honest with you, young men, probably one of their biggest one is pornography.
Yes.
And
Mm.
so I would say probably just in the last probably month, I've probably had about 8 or 9 young guys at their own initiative reach out to me and say,
Wow.
I'm struggling in this area.
Yeah.
Can we have a conversation, and what can happen? And I have mentored so many different guys who have
Yeah.
gone from being the abyss of pornography to seeing them walk in victories in that area
Wow.
and have a
Wow.
whole shift in their thinking about what
Yeah.
does masculinity and what does male sexuality look like from a
Yeah.
Christ-centered perspective.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's rough. Sometimes I'll call it 2 or 3 steps forward and a step back. But the idea is that they're making progress. And ultimately, it's I want to make sure I say this clearly. It's not about the behavior as much as it is.
Mm.
It's about what is going on in the heart.
Yes.
Once this begins to get resolved, the behaviors start to take care of themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, you talked about love relationship. We're wired for love, we're wired for relationship.
Right.
However, we've not been equipped and educated in the very things we were made for.
Right.
And so, even for me in the business world, I've had to create curriculum around emotional intelligence
Mm-hmm.
simply because the traditional education system, like, so if you have at least a degree in any Western society, you've invested at least 20 years being programmed primarily in IQ,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Smart, our ability to comprehend, to tackle technical things and acquire technical knowledge. So the entire world system and society is designed to equip us intellectually, but not emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're not just thinking beings, we're actually emotional beings, and with our hearts we actually engage with God, because at the soul level, right, the mind and the heart belongs to the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's where you connect, where the spirit connects with the soul
Right.
as well. So what usually happens is that many people may have matured physically, even intellectually,
Mm-hmm.
even spiritually, but the emotional maturity,
Right.
where there's self regulation, self leadership, self discipline, self awareness, right? Self expression,
Mm-hmm.
those are skills that have not been developed.
Right.
Now, naturally, we would have wanted the family unit to have been the safest space for this to have been developed. But what I've also seen, depending on what culture people were raised in, there are many cultures that actually mute people at a very young age. So you're not allowed to express your frustration, your
Mm-hmm.
anger, the natural sides of us,
Right.
right? Joy, right? All of the expressions.
Mm-hmm.
And a very interesting way, many people think that masking and being subdued
Right.
is the most Christian thing you can do,
Right.
right? When you think about false humility, no, right? Real humility is you feel safe, but you choose your words and your actions out of power. But what we are finding is that many people have been, is it disempowered, weakened, um, not seen, not heard, muted, undermined, minimized, and so their real self is hiding, but they're showing an adapted version of themselves to the
Right.
world, because the world says this is the version of you we are going to accept,
Right.
right? So the world messages this is what it looks like.
Right.
B fits this mold.
Mhm.
And so many people are primarily putting all their energy to be accepted as what they are not.
Right.
Right? They're becoming who they're not,
Right.
simply to be integrated into the world that was never designed for their full wellness, right?
Right.
And so even for me in the business world, I'm realizing that as I teach entrepreneurship and all of that, people who are transitioning from being the perfect employee, because that is a mold we were designed by the school system, designed us, molded us to be perfect employees. Do
Mhm.
what you're being told to do, right? Meet the needs of the industrial system, the industrial era, get skills so that you can have a livelihood, on and on. That's wonderful. But when, say, an idea from God pops into their hearts, when God says you need to do something beyond just livelihood, survival, there is a conflict, there is an internal shift. And the person, the version of us that can do the God assignments, actually needs EQ, because God will call us to connect deeply with people.
Hmm.
God will connect, God will call us to reveal our hearts to people.
Hmm.
God will connect to express ourselves to others. God will call us to lead other people, to influence other people, to persuade other people. And we realize that the assignment and calling of God, you have to connect with people. You cannot fulfill that assignment without the heart to heart
Right.
connection. And that's where there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of frustration, because we cannot do it just with our own head, intellect, smartness. We actually have to walk heart to heart, shoulder to shoulder with other humans that God has called us to serve. And so leadership in that space requires EQ, leadership in business, excellence in service,
Yep.
right? All forms of service requires us to connect with the people we
Yeah.
hope to lead. And so for me, I start seeing my students struggle because they're not free to, they don't feel free to express their thoughts, right? So there's a lot of work in there. So I see the parallel about equipping people to connect,
Right.
and mentorship definitely
Right.
requires you to connect.
Yeah.
So that's so beautiful. I really appreciate and
Yeah.
applaud the work that you're
You
doing.
made a comment there, the word mask.
Mm,
That's a big issue. We put on these images. I'm
mm,
supposed to act in this way.
whew,
And the issue is those masks need to come off.
mm,
And that's kind of what we talk about in those four areas, from superficial, authentic, transparent.
mm,
When you're vulnerable, there are no masks. You're
mm.
broken. And but that's where Christ can do his most redeeming work. And I totally agree with you
Oh,
about the emotional intelligence that people need to have. And a lot of times, young guys, late teens, early 20s, are starting to they're just like, I need to come out of my shell. I need to figure out who I am as a man.
wow.
Um, how has God wired me? So we talk a lot about masks that need to come off. And,
Mm,
I could even tell you stories just in the last 3 or 4 years of how God's been, taking masks off my own life. And it
wow.
has been a really good segue. It's been painful, but it's a really good segue into conversations that I'm having with young guys who I recognize they're struggling because they're trying to have this image that that's not what God wants of them. Their,
Mm,
their true self is not being really seen. So helping them to understand who they fully are as a man. I don't know if
mm.
you've known some of this. There's a book out again. I mentioned John Eldridge, Fathered by God. I love that
Wow.
book, and I make reference to this idea that God is always writing a story, and there's stages of manhood. And if you actually graph them out from birth to death, what you find is some of those stages overlap.
Mm,
And there's like three of those stages overlap between roughly the ages of 18 to 30. And it's like when you graph it out, it's actually, well, no wonder that's such a challenging time, young
yeah.
adulthood. And some of it is, God, what are you trying to shape in me? What things am I holding on to that are not
Mm,
true about
wow.
myself? Misunderstandings about who you are, God, and my relationship with you. A
Wow.
lot of times, like I said, pornography tends to be a big issue, but a lot of those get resolved once they start to understand who they are in Christ.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. What you're talking about, it's almost like replanting. It's almost like when God decides to, okay, move the men out of, you know, the family unit to start their own units. It's almost like when you want to report a plant, is that there is disturbances and reshaping, and you now
yep,
have to grow and emerge into your own person outside of. Oh my gosh, that's I never saw it that way until
yeah,
until you're speaking right now. Is that God is involved in the births, in the nurturing,
mhm,
and in the emergence of the full man,
right,
because ultimately God wants to, bring forth a family unit, a new generation of people
correct,
from the man. And so by design,
yep,
you have to grow in stature, grow in strength, grow in wisdom, for you to be able to handle the full responsibility of what that looks like.
yep,
And I completely agree that there's equipping required. I remember when our son turned 10, my husband literally, they went, they took, was it a night or 2 nights, it took him, I don't know what they talked about, I don't
Right.
know, but
Oh,
but I can see that exercise, that process, that deliberate time or celebrating, if
mm,
even at that young age, because when we think about what's happening in societies, yeah, young men are being exposed, right, too soon. So in a way, maybe in the past you want certain things, certain conversations you may want to keep till 15, 16. You almost have to start it, and
yeah,
be, hopefully you become the first person your kids hear from on certain topics, right? You
right.
don't want them to be to be
Yeah,
educated out there. You don't want it to be the first time they are hearing about certain things from a teacher or from the school
right.
system, because I've also seen that initial exposure can be corrupted as well. So so this is very, very important, very, very important. So I
Mhm,
hope that the audience, in one way or the other, they, whether it's to their brother or their son or to their friends, that they get involved, or whether it's in the church, or even just creating programs within the church, or trying to tap into the resources of your book.
mhm,
I think this is the assignment the church has now,
mhm.
to equip us for end time ministries, because as we race into the end of times, I believe that the church is going to get stronger, not weaker. So we are likely to see certain equipping, new tools, new grace,
Right,
new grace, new nurturing, new insights, new revelation, hidden things being revealed for the first time ever, because the where the world is going to look different from where we're coming from. And
exactly.
in a way, we have to equip ourselves in very sophisticated, advanced, strategic ways, to equip the next generation, so
Right.
that generations can also be ready for their own battles, right?
Yeah,
Every generation has their own unique challenges with the cell phone. It's not enough to just lock your door, right? The world is the world literally is in the hand. So whenever you give your kids a cell phone, you're giving them the world.
yep,
So that was never like that before. Before, all you had to say was shut the TV, and then you shut out the world. So yes, I so this resource, your book, your not for profit, your programs, it's timely. It's timely, and so definitely there are several people that I believe that you all together are going to do more bigger
yeah.
things, and if there's
I like to say too, and this is kind of rhetorical to guys when I say this to them. I like, do you want to be the last generation
mm,
of men who follow Christ? And everybody's like,
Ooh.
no, I don't want to be. Well, then what are you going to do intentionally to invest in the next generation? It might be your nephew, it might be your
Mm,
son, it might be the neighbor
mm,
guy across the street, somebody you work
mm,
with, somebody at church.
mm,
They're all around us. There's
mm,
50,000 of them in Wichita.
mm.
And all you got to do is invest in one man and
Wow.
have the tools. So one of the things we're working on, and we're a young organization, we're teaming with some other groups, but we're also learning how to coach better. So once a guy's gone through the boot camp, we're doing like a follow up right now on a 30, 60, and 90-day follow up. Hey, have
Mhm,
you invested in somebody? How can we support you? How can we help you? Here's some resources on our website. Here's just let them know about our weekly article post that comes out every Thursday.
mhm.
Just resources that we can give you, or
Oh, wow.
algorithms for things that you can bring your young guy to, and we can have some fun and learn more about what it means to be men.
Wow, this is quite fascinating, because just over the weekend, I actually released a resource. I called it Emotional Intelligence for Coaches.
Mm,
Um, because in my world, I'm seeing a lot of coaches get frustrated
hmm
when they say people don't show up, people don't follow through, people are not energized, they're not, invested or investing. And part of what the framework I designed and I put together is this idea that many people are buried beneath emotions. We all know in a way what we ought to do,
Hmm.
right? If information is, I said information doesn't lead to transformation, because information is just like raw materials. It has to run through a process for it to be digestible, to bring about impact and transformation. And so there's this framework where I talk about activation, inspiration, education, motivation, challenging people, and then transformation. Is that what I've seen through working with different people is that there needs to be an activation. And so, for example, your own journey of saying, awaken, right? We all wake up at different times for different reasons.
Right.
And it's at the point when we decide that something has to change, right? Many times we're trying to mentor, guide people who haven't decided that they are ready to change,
Hmm.
right? So you will find that you are doing all the work. You are putting out all the energy, and they are just listening to you because they are not invested. They've not made, they don't even believe there's something that has to change. So I walk people through, you really, before you take people on a journey of transformation, they need to be activated. And activation has to say something in me I have to change, whether it's my mindset, whether it's my skill set, my way, my current way is not working.
Right.
Something in what I'm doing is not working for the life I want. And I'm taking on the responsibility that I will commit to shift as those things are revealed to me.
Yeah.
That is the barest minimum, right? Because until people say, because change is painful, nobody wants to
Mhm.
change. And
Right.
transformation is massive change. So for coaches, I see that frustration of they're putting content out there, they're putting resources, and they're inviting people, follow us, we can help you. But I'm going, the only people that will follow you are people who want a better life than the one they have,
Yep.
right? So, do you really want a better life? And then on and on is also the stages that I've seen is even when we decide we want to change, we also need to give them inspiration. And
Mhm.
inspiration is believing you can change.
Yep.
Because some of the people you mentor may want to change, but they are so deep in whatever that problem is, they may have lost hope
Yep.
that is actually that recovery is possible. And that's where the message of Christ can also serve as
Right.
inspiration, where you give examples of other people that have changed, that have done the work. And so as humans, we also need inspirational stories so that we can continue to believe, so that we can continue to hope as we walk through that process, because nothing happens overnight. So yeah, so I actually developed this entire framework because the reason I believe in coaching, and I actually also, I never knew I was going to be a coach, but I decided to get into that space, is simply because when people awaken, or should I say, use this phrase, self actualize, when people want to go beyond survival into thriving, when we want to say, okay, the mandate of Genesis 1:28, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, when we want to return back to God's original identity and position for us to rule in the world, what I have found is that it's not an easy process to journey through. I'm sure your own journey, you've seen, you've had to tap into, resources of other people, encouragement from other people to become the person that you are. And so I see God, that there's a wave of people that God is releasing and trying to mature to take their position back in the world. And so we, just like Christ will say, I'm first among many brethren, is that I believe so many more people needs to be mobilized. And what I see is that the coaching industry is going to continue to grow simply because they are focused on serving the individual,
Right.
while the traditional education system, right, prepares people to serve the industries. So I see that difference is that, in a way, I'm not saying everything that's happening in the coaching industry is right, but in general, I understand the general principle because I'm coming from the world of academia as well, where I see that when someone seeks help, wants help that is beyond what the system of the world is ready for, right? The system of the world has hospitals, But trust me, we don't need to get sick before we seek and to learn how to eat well, exercise well, sleep well. Right? Right? Why was that not included in the education system? How just to be well, not to be sick. So what I'm seeing is that many people are leaving the industries or bringing their skills from the industries to serve people, to serve individuals, to serve their community. And so it's a beautiful sight to behold as I see more people seeking help, getting help, and mentors being raised, coaches being raised
Right.
to equip God's people to rise above survival. Right? We have to thrive. God
Right.
made us to thrive in Christ. And so
And
there's
the thing that I have found for these guys in that warrior age of life,
mhm,
there's two words that tend to just really perk them up. And those are the words of delight and validation.
mm,
And I always like to say that they
mm,
probably have never really heard that,
hmm,
that I delight in them and
mm,
they have what it takes.
mm,
Whatever that next challenge in his life, whatever it is, they're going to call that girl up and ask her out, or they're going to have that interview for that job, or they're going to make a purchase on a car, whatever it is,
mm.
that they know that somebody believes in them.
Yes.
And I'll tell you a little quick story here. So I was speaking at a men's breakfast here back in the spring, probably about 40 or 50 men in a rural church. And there was this farmer, older man, he's probably in his 80s. He just had the saddest face on,
Wow.
just kind of grumpy.
Mhm,
I was talking about this issue about
mhm,
validation and delight. And he happened to be sitting where I was standing. I just put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Do you understand, sir, that God delights in you?
oh my gosh.
God, he believes in you. You have what it takes." And I have never seen a mouth down so much go to the biggest smile. And he just perked up.
Wow.
And he came up to me afterwards and said to me, "I am so glad that I came today." And what
Wow.
struck me was this man was in his 80s, and I had the false notion that he had figured it all out.
Mm,
And the reality is, it doesn't matter how old we are. I like
mm,
to say, whether we're a year and a half old toddler to the day we die, we're asking those two questions. And we need to hear that from our Heavenly Father, but we also need to hear it from somebody who's going to come alongside us, put their armor on our shoulder, and say, "I believe in you. I delight in you, and you have what it takes." Uh,
yes.
and so that young generation is just hungry for that. Not to
Yes.
tolerate their sin, not that's not what we're talking. We're
Mm-mm.
talking about actually believing in them and that in Christ they have what it takes to do that next step in life. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what it
Yes.
boils down to is really what mentoring's all about.
Yes. And it goes to the core of identity because I mean Jesus got that.
Yep.
When he was being baptized, the voice from heaven, also at the Mount of Transfiguration, is that and I guess this is my own frustration with the society in general, is that it almost feels to me that we're living in a fantasy world that is so different from reality, the reality of how we are wired.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me that we are being pulled into a world that is not real.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas what's actually real and what is of value, the things that are of value, the things we ought to be investing in terms of family, faith,
Mm-hmm.
relationships, right? Being grounded in the things that are really of value. And for those who may want to say, what are those things? Guess what? When 2020 happened, everything that we turned to was what we ought to be turning to, right? We all went back home.
Mm-hmm.
We all went back home. We all needed love, support, encouragement. Like we all hunkered down with the ones we held tight. What we held tight, what we were holding on to in 2020 is actually what is most precious,
Mm-hmm.
right? The people in our lives, the people who see us, know us, love us, that we're doing life with. And so we need to be prioritizing that, and we need to be giving one another love. And it's not everybody we're going to win, but definitely I believe we are assigned to to specific people, and specific people are assigned to us, and our job is to stay connected. We can be the source. God can use us to serve other people, and God definitely will use other people to meet our own needs as well. And I think that's where this renewal happens, and this healthy the healthy life that we all crave for is that we are not alone, but that there's meaning, there's support, there's an anchor, and then we can also be strengthened so that we can strengthen other
Yep.
people.
Yep.
I yes, I really want to thank this. This has been a very, very delightful conversation. I know this is not going to be the end of it, I hope. And I want to share, I want to ask you really, any other final thoughts for the viewers today?
Well, just check out the website, mentoring-warriors.com. Go on there if you want to, take the self assessment, and then we can communicate with you, sign up for the newsletter. And we're on social media, we're on Facebook, and we're on Instagram. Also.
Oh, fantastic,
So
fantastic. This has been a great, great conversation. I want to thank you and also say thank you to Caris Publishing for creating the platform to advance these stories and to keep equipping our community with incredible resources from authors like you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I wish you the very best day.
thank you.
Thank you.